And welcome back to video 5 of the CAA series. And we're going to pick up where we left off on the list subnets and list devices. And in these two various workflows, they're going to provide basically the export functionality. So list subnets is really export child block, list devices is export device. Again, the functionality here is that you're going to have different types of queries. So when you look at the export block functionality, or if you look at the way that they structure this, is they give you the ability to do by container, which you would need for the subnets, raw container if you're going to include the free blocks, and then, raw container if you're going to tell it to use a full container path or whatever you specify. But it really uses a query, and the query is going to go directly back to how we do the Swagger and how the documentation discusses how to do those functions. So we're going to go back to those queries, and there's a number of different selectors that can be used, both in percentages of availability, dates and times, names, IP addresses, if IP addresses fall within the subnet, and so on. So what we'll do here is we're going to modify this. We're going to do a post again and change our name just for documentation purposes. IPC list subnets. Now again, we're going to change this to pay credentials. This message check, we're going to get rid of this because again, we're not doing this over a queries. We have to post this data. And then in the child block, effectively, it's going to use this payload. So we're going to set up a query, basically, that's going to allow us to do these few things. And let's go ahead and get all of these done so that we can just debug everything we do. Okay. Now, let's go down here into our IPC header. We'll duplicate this. And we're going to say list subnets. IPC list subnets. I believe that's what we're working on there, right? IPC list subnets should be the API. So they named them the same as those. And here, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do query because I know what my query is. I want to list it by certain data. I'm not going to pass it a container or anything. So if I do query, it's going to override every other value. It just simply needs this. Now here, I can do my container equals, and I can do ATL. And remember, that's within single quotes, and we could try that. Let's see what happens here. Hey, great, that first time. So that's real simple. And what you're going to get here is just, again, all of the JSON that you can expect to see. So now, understanding this JSON, then, what are you going to do with this? And let's just cover it real quick so you can see it if you haven't already done this. So this gives you a great tree view of all of the objects that now in an object for the export of the child block, we have two parts, two objects beneath it, two sub-objects. The child block maintains all of the block details, including the containers, the interfaces. So if this were attached to a router or device, you would see it here. And you would also see, of course, its name. Now this is my router container. You'll see that RV320 is our router where we did a discovery earlier. So there's some useful information there. The user-defined fields then are an array, and they are an array of field equals value pairs. So if you want to process that, you would need to process an array, pull those out, split out the first equals and the equals, pull out the field and the values and walk through that. The second part of the object is a subnet policy, and this is where they maintain, if you're looking at IPControl and you're looking at a subnet, these are all of the policies that you're going to want to look at in terms of management and all of its details for gateway, the network links, the primary failover servers, all of those details. So you're going to have that type of information that you're going to want to view and manage there as well. So in other things like that, forward domains and other stuff. So the question then is, and we'll come back to these videos, as I mentioned, is the value here is not only, this is just an API at this point. We're just giving you data back. We hope to simplify the whole input. You just do your username, password, and we could even get rid of that and do this through a service account. We could do it through header authentication. We could do some other things here. We will. But the point is, simplify the input, get the results. Now, what do we want to do with the results? Do you need all of this information? And the key to this is, like we started to do in the other video, is I can either use a change node, and I can modify the structure any way I want to. I could use a function node, process all of the output, run through each one of these, pull out everything, and build just one object that has perhaps the subnet information, the container, the default gateway, the DHCP, and maybe some things that, if I were to export the data, would be interesting to the person receiving that data. So once again, I don't know how all of the different things are going to work in your environment, but I can say that, as long as you can identify the type of data, the format, JSON, XML, CSV, we can do literally anything with it once we have it. And that is the only point of that. So list subnets, very simple to do. And you can use that filter then if I wanted to break this down. So if I go, let's try demo, let's say container contains demo and status equals subnet, just to make sure it doesn't give us aggregates or anything else. Right? And there we go. And we should get that data back as well. So that's a very, very simple API. And now embellishing that with other data. And I might come back with one video doing some math where we can maybe say, for purposes of an administrator, maybe back with the site data that we did in the initial video when we were finishing up the APIs, I might have it when we output the subnets, go in and create a CSV file, have it as CSV, create a tab. Well, we'd have to create multiple CSVs, but have it create one for each of the outputs. So like, here are all the subnets and here are all the IP addresses in these subnets. And then have it, output what we have in the template so that they can see it and fill in details, or, maybe email it off like that. We'll come up with something there. Now the list devices, same thing. Once again, just repeat. So once we find our process, everything literally at this point becomes a repeat process. We just need to make sure it works first and get it to the format that we want. And then let's figure out how to simplify it, make it easier to work, and figure out how to tie it in with your different products, different services, and how you're going to want to see this data. And we'll go through some more examples there. But let's get rid of this, and I'm not going to just keep doing that. So let's just copy this one. And I'll just put this here just so we can get a debug. And I want to put one down on my cache. So if I get any errors, I can see that while we're testing. And let's just hit that. And now with export devices, this is basically the same function in the documentation if you look at this. So you have block, which will give you the IP. You can do other options here like recurse container hierarchy, all of that detail. And you can also do query. Query overwrites all of the input for the parameters, as they mentioned here. So again, we'll go up here and we're going to do literally just the same thing. We're just going to copy this one. Let's change this to list subnets or list devices. I'm going to name this IPC list devices. And then our body will be very much this. And this will go here. And one thing we're going to do, and actually I could use the same thing here. And we'll do this a little different. So let's do demo dash, what was the name of that? Demo and demo site DC2. Okay, demo site DC2. Okay, so what we'll tell it here then is that in the query, export all the devices in the container where the container contains this. And let's see if we get something back. We should get a whole list of IPs that were already allocated, like we had, routers. And this gives you that full IP range. So again, here's a whole bunch of data. Here's a big array. If you want to go through it differently, we can. If you want to visualize it, most of these tools can visualize. But once again, there's a lot of extraneous data that may or may not be of interest to you in this particular case. And you may want to narrow this down further. So, I may not like that visualization, which I don't. And I might want to say here then, instead of giving me all that, I might want to say in routers and device type equals server. Well, let's do server first, see if we get anything. I don't know that I have any servers. Oh, yeah, there you go. So we do have servers, and we could do other things too. So we could search by MAC addresses, domain name. We could do quite a bit of different filters, and that's the power. That's the great thing of this. Now, again, once I have this data for you, it's of any type of use by your service that's using it. So if you need to modify it, here's where we would modify it, and again, do a function change or some other thing there. Now, the list pools is very similar. This is going to be for listing out your DHCP pools, address pools. And these are when you create that, these aren't the manual DHCP, those are devices. This is specifically looking for that DHCP range. So if you had a start end address and is either one or more devices, that would be that. Let's do this again and copy it. Rinse and repeat. Everything is rinse and repeat. That should do that. We need to change this again to credentials. Okay. Now, this one has a little different properties here. So looks like we can do the same thing here. Now, the pools here, I think you're looking for like blocks. It's looking for other types of data. So real quick, let's go up to export. And, I'll tell you, this has been very difficult to search lately. Let's go down to export adder pool, address pool. Okay. And here are our filters. I'm going to kind of move this around here. All right. So our filters have a name, which we can do a range name. We can do that an IP address is within the pool, which is great. So if you're looking for a DHCP pool and name and you have an IP address of a client, that's great. You can do it by container. So any subnets in the container, any address pools in the block, any address pools assigned to the net service. And that's effectively where we would go in and do these checks. So we can still do the container here, and I'm just going to do that. So let's just do, we're going to keep this here, and let's clone that. PC list ADDR pools. And this is IPC list ADDR pools. And what we need here, again, we can do the query. So I'm just going to go up to this. We're going to keep this. And we're going to get rid of this and just use the container. I could break this down to the block, which would make more sense. But maybe I want to see what are all the subnets that have DHCP in the demo site container. Okay. And adder pools should be right. And this should then have all of those address pools then, and we'll see the type. We should see our end address, start address, and then if there's any classes or anything else assigned to it. All right, so the exports, again, are real simple. Now, because when we talked about this previously, you had to set up and get the token, and you had to set the header and do those things, and do the init, do the export, and so on. And we're doing all that here. So we're functionally doing all of the pulls back in the initialization, which is great. Now, the rest of these here, I guess we have one more here. This is the domain resource records, and this is just like we had exported before in the gets, but this is now the export. So let's go ahead and just show that out. IPC list domain RRs. And we're going to need this, so I might as well just copy it. Get rid of this. We're going to wire this. Credentials. Before I lose my paste. PC list domain are ours. Okay. All right. Now, and again, we have some different syntax now. So we need to understand what this is looking for. And again, it's going to give us this query syntax, which is, fantastic. But now we need to go up and we need to look at the documentation. So what does the documentation tell us about exporting domain RRs? And again, this does not work very well for me. So let's do something here. Export domain RRs. Actually, export domain resource record. One more down. This one. Okay. So here, now what we need to have in our selector is like a domain name. So we could just do that very simply. But here now with the domains and the resource records, we support user-defined fields. So now you have an option that if you had a user-defined field attached to this, that you could do these exports and selectors. You can also have the resource record type by show me all the domain and these CNAME records or MX records or text records. So if you were looking to check all of the authorization, DNS auth or something type records, you could pull those. So based on that, then we should really go up and use domain, and let's just do it with domain and see if that's the simplest we can do. And then we can filter it from there. So we'll say domain equals eval-dom.com, trailing dot. Note one thing, when we think of zones, it's not the trailing dot, it's eval-dom.com. When we think of the domain, it's in IPControl's context, it's eval-dom.com dot. So when you do exports, if you know a domain's there, it doesn't find it, just add the trailing dot. You may need to do that in your script as well. Let's see, we didn't get that. So what was, that would probably do it. All right, and that is all I have in there, apparently, for those resource records, which is the one we added here shortly. So that is effectively the exports. Now, with the exports, again, you need to have the documentation. These are the selectors, and there isn't a very clear, documentation in the like the Swagger and others where you're going to pull these selectors. So really use it, as you need to, but concatenate the selectors based on input as needed or other types of changes. Now you can also set an option to this to tell it to include device resource records and not just the domain. So what I did was the domain resource records. Let's see if we can make this option work with the include domain. And I know they mention it here. So let's do options. Let's do that. And so up here, let's try doing options. Actually, just paste that because that is the syntax. Place is not a function. Okay. Let's do this then. Let's see if it couldn't read that. Nope, still doesn't read that there. So I'll have to figure that piece of it out. But effectively here, then that should wrap up this. But I'm gonna, I may touch on this when we come back to the device records when I get those options there. But hang tight, and I'll see you in the next video. And what we'll do with that is I'm going to touch on the callouts again. And, we'll talk about maybe as a high level how these might be utilized when we're dealing with resource record approvals, device record approvals if you're doing those, and or just kind of as you're doing transactions, if you want to audit them elsewhere or do some other things with it, you can. And that's it. So I'm going to wrap this up video and number 5, and we'll come back in another video and touch on a few of the call outs and some other topics. Take care. I'll see you soon.